Most empires eventually turn to dust, but this Mediterranean powerhouse has been conquered, rebuilt and reimagined so many times, it practically has a PhD in the art of the comeback. From the oldest continuously inhabited cities on Earth to a modern economy that feels like a ghost story, we're diving into the beautiful contradiction that is Lebanon. To start off, we actually have evidence of tools in coastal caves showing people were living in Lebanon during the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods. But things started changing, or shall we say, urbanizing, around 5000 BCE in a place called Byblos. This is where the Phoenician civilization started, and if you've ever written a text or an essay, you can actually thank or blame them for it. Of course, that's not all they gave us, because I like to think of them as the world's first global startup. So while everyone else was busy fighting over patches of dirt, the Phoenicians looked at the ocean and said, "We can sell here." You could say they were the ultimate maritime hustlers, and they were primarily famous for two things: cedar wood, which the Egyptians were obsessed with for their temples, and the rare dye made from sea snails, called Tyrian purple. Because of these resources and its strategic location, Lebanon basically became the main street of the ancient world. As you already know, the Egyptians came for the timber, but that's just the start. Assyrians showed up right after to demand taxes, and the Persians took over because they loved those Phoenician ships. Then came the big one, Alexander the Great. In 332 BCE, he tried to take the city of Tyre, and when they wouldn't surrender, he literally had a land bridge out into the sea to get them. He wasn't the only one who went to extreme measures, though, because soon after, the Romans moved in and turned Beirut into a centre for law and culture. Then came the Ottoman Empire, which stayed around for 400 years. In fact, they only left after World War I. And then the French took over. They did a full cultural makeover in Beirut, which explains why, to this day, it feels like a chic Mediterranean Paris hybrid. By 1943, Lebanon was finally ready to take the reins. The people wanted to be their own boss. The only problem was, they had absolutely no idea how to go about it, especially with so many different religious groups. So what did they do? They came up with this unique gentleman's agreement called the National Covenant, which basically means every religion had to be represented in the government. Their president would always be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of the house a Shia Muslim. For a while it worked like a charm, but as we know with history, things can change fast. And in 1975, that dream of becoming a strong, unified nation hit a wall, resulting in a messy 15-year civil war. When the war finally ended in 1990, a billionaire named Rafik Hariri stepped in, became the prime minister, and spearheaded the reconstruction of Lebanon, which I like to call the Great Rebuild. Beirut literally rose from the ashes like a phoenix, transforming into a sleek, modern city. But that's not to say they've had a smooth ride since then, because after that great accomplishment, they had to deal with big political shake-ups and a whole lot of stress from the Syrian conflicts next door, which actually has a lot to do with the geography. So let's talk about that. Lebanon is sitting right at the meeting point of 3 different continents, which is why it's been the ultimate crossroads for basically every civilization you've heard of. It covers about 10,452 square kilometres, or just a little over 4,000 square miles, making it small enough for you to drive from the sunny seashore to the snowy mountain peaks in just an hour. While we're talking about the coast, it's actually only a narrow strip of land, but what makes it unique is that it's home to the big 5 ancient cities, namely Beirut, Byblos, Sigdun, Tripoli, and Tyre. You've met some of them in our history section, but I'm going to tell you more about them in a bit. For now, let's take a closer look at the country's layout. To put it simply, it's kind of like a giant geological sandwich. You've got the narrow coastal plain where the Mediterranean waves hit the shore. Then out of nowhere you're hit with 2 massive mountain ranges, the Lebanon and the Anti-Lebanon Mountains. They run parallel to each other, and tucked right between them is the Bekaa Valley. It's honestly like a hidden garden in the middle of a rugged landscape. Now let's talk about the mountains, because these are some of the most important features of the entire country. So, rising over the valley is Kornat as-Soda in the north, which peaks at 3,088 metres, or a little over 10,000 feet. Then there's Jabal al-Sheikh in the south at 2,814 metres, or 9,230 feet. Because these mountains are so high and, frankly, pretty close to the sea, it makes the weather pretty weird. Did you know that during the spring, you can literally go skiing in the mountains in the morning and be lounging on a beach, swimming in the Mediterranean by the afternoon? Which means you can practically choose your own adventure every day, and you don't even have to wait for the seasons to turn to enjoy your favourite activities. But of course, that doesn't mean you can just throw your safety out the window, because when it comes to planning for these excursions, preparation is key. And that's exactly why I've put a custom trip planner and a travel-safe VPN in the description below. So now you can explore Lebanon worry-free and enjoy a road trip through the country without any hassle. Speaking of road trips, if you want to add that to your itinerary, here's what I recommend you do. Start way up north in a car. It's the most rural part of Lebanon, filled with wooded hills and wide coastal plains that grow a huge chunk of the country's food. It's beautiful, but I gotta say, it's been having a tough time lately, especially with Syrian refugees moving in to find safety. Then, just south of there is Tripoli, Lebanon's second largest city. And the atmosphere here is so different. It's got crusader castles, ancient mosques, and Lebanon's only islands. As you head toward the centre, you'll find Mount Lebanon, which is the historic heart of the Maronite Christian community. Plus, it's the place where those legendary cedar trees grow. In fact, these trees are so iconic that they decided to put it in their flag. But sadly, because of climate change and forest fires, these cedar trees only exist in a few protected groves. On the bright side, though, Mount Lebanon is also where you'll find Jar Baal, or Byblos, which is one of the oldest places where people have never stopped living. Past that, you'll reach the Beirut Governorate. It's a bustling peninsula sticking out into the sea. Heading further south, you'd find Sidon and Tyre, the old-school capitals of the Phoenician mariners. But of course, times have changed, and instead of warships, you'll see amazing seafood restaurants and some of the best beaches in the country. Finally, to close off your road trip, I suggest looping back into the interior of the Bekaa Valley. The capital here is Zali, which is known as the City of Wine and Poetry. And come on, who wouldn't want to visit a place with that nickname? I know I would. Now, if you're looking for more ancient culture, continue your expedition to Baalbek, which the Greeks called Heliopolis. It's right on the border with Syria and holds some of the most mind-blowing Roman ruins you'll ever see. But while those Roman temples show just how much wealth used to flow through this region, the modern-day balance sheet tells a completely different story. See, for a long time, Lebanon was the it spot for banking and business, but lately the economy has felt a bit like a ghost economy, meaning it looks functional from the outside, but underneath it all, things are a little hollowed out. The good news is, we're finally seeing a flicker of life, because after years of the economy shrinking, 2025 actually saw real GDP growth by about 3.5% to 5%. That's the first we've seen a plus sign in a while. And it's mostly thanks to tourists coming back and people working abroad, sending money home. But here's where it gets a bit technical, so bear with me for a while. On paper, the 2026 budget looks like a masterpiece of responsibility. It's balanced, but more specifically, the government expects to bring in over 538 trillion Lebanese pounds. That's about $5.92 billion, and spend exactly the same amount. No deficit. Sounds great, right? Well, if you look closer, it's a bit of an accounting trick, because about 88% of that spending goes straight into current expenditures. And that's just paying salaries, pensions, and keeping the lights on. The remaining 12%? That goes into capital spending, which includes stuff like roads, bridges, power plants, and other projects that help a country grow in the future. See the discrepancy? In a healthy economy, we usually want that ratio to be much closer to 70-30. But right now, Lebanon is essentially spending all its money on today and leaving almost nothing for tomorrow. And it gets even more complicated when you look at where that money goes. Between paying public sector salaries and servicing old debts, around 80% to 85% of the entire budget is gone before they even fix a single pothole or build a new hospital. Yet, the public sector is still struggling with staff shortages and low wages because the Lebanese pound has lost more than 98% of its value since 2019. So while the government is spending $1.12 billion on defence, it's only giving the Ministry of Industry, which is a sector that actually helps businesses grow, a tiny $2.18 million. That's less than 0.5% of the budget. The silver lining, inflation. Back in 2023, it was at a terrifying 221%. But now it's finally cooling down and is expected to hit 15.2% or even drop into single digits in 2026 for the first time in years. So, what's next? Well, economists see three paths moving forward. 1, things will keep getting better if the government actually fixes the banks and keeps the peace. 2, everyone becomes complacent, meaning they'll be stable enough, but they won't really grow. And 3, things could slide backward if political drama takes over again. No matter which of those three paths the country takes, there's one safety net that has never failed the Lebanese people: the family. Family is the absolute sun that everything else in Lebanon orbits around. In fact, in Lebanese culture, the family's needs always come before the individual's. It's a tight-knit, all-for-one mentality where, if one person succeeds, the whole family succeeds, and if one person struggles, everyone steps in. Which is why you'll rarely see nursing homes here. To them, it's a point of pride to care for your elders at home. But this deep tradition is constantly bumping against the modern world, because the younger generations often find themselves in a tug-of-war between the conservative values of their grandparents and the fast-paced, globalised lifestyle they see on the internet. Outside the home, you'll see this clash in how they dress. While you'll notice plenty of Western fashion in the cities, traditional attire, like the sherwal, which are loose-fitting pants, or beautifully embroidered kaftans, still come out on special occasions. And nowhere is this more obvious than at a wedding. Lebanese weddings are grand, multi-day marathons featuring the zafeh, which is a loud, high-energy procession with drummers, dabke folk dancing, and, naturally, great food. Lebanese cuisine is a Mediterranean masterpiece, built on staples like pita bread, rice, and bulgur. This is the cornerstone of every dish, and it's made from parboiled, dried, and ground wheat. Besides that, there's also tabbouleh, or kibbeh, before. It's a savoury meat pie, complete with parsley, tomatoes, and other finely chopped vegetables and herbs. And if you're feeling thirsty, I suggest trying the arak, which is their national drink, made from fermented grapes and anise. It turns milky whites when you add water and ice, and it's a staple at any long lunch. But you know what? At the end of the day, whether it's through a shared plate of kibbeh or the shade of an ancient cedar, Lebanon proves that while empires and economies might be fragile, a culture built on family and flavour is absolutely unbreakable. So if you could choose one thing as the foundation of Lebanon as a whole, what would it be? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, you'll love this next one.